pull up a chair. You are just in time. The coffee here at Cafe Karma is always exactly how you like it, and, well, the atmosphere around us today is thick.
It really is. It's profound.
Yeah.
Very heavy.
Right. We are sinking straight down into the earthly and psychological plane of the nakshatra Purva Bhadrapada. You sent us a truly fascinating stack of sources for this ancient Vedic astrology text, some really dense psychological profiles.
Yeah, and those
Yeah.
modern mythological translations were brilliant, too.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to sift through this heavy material, cross-reference these ancient texts, and map out exactly what it means to live as a dual-faced transformer.
A dual-faced transformer. I mean, it's a heavy title to carry through life, but an incredibly accurate one.
Right.
When we look at the cosmic blueprint of Purva Bhadrapada in the materials you provided, we're looking at an architectural structure of the human psyche that is built on an intense, almost eerie duality. It's the raw juxtaposition of the seen and the unseen, operating at the exact same time.
Okay, let's unpack this for you right away, because the sources paint a very vivid picture. To understand this duality, I want you to imagine a house. A pristine, quiet, suburban house.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
It has a perfectly manicured lawn, a fresh coat of paint, a lovely little pathway. It looks entirely normal. But if you walk inside, find the hidden bookshelf, and open the concealed basement door, you discover a massive, dark, underground, heavy metal recording studio.
Oh, wow. Or like a secret occult library.
Exactly. The point is, the exterior tells you absolutely nothing about the intense, roaring reality happening beneath the floorboards.
What a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
Hmm.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the Purva Bhadrapada native, this is exactly how they operate in society.
So they're blending in.
Completely.
Yeah.
They have this remarkable tendency to hold down a totally normal 9-to-5 job. They commute, they smile at their neighbors, they project this very amicable, acceptable social exterior. But secretly, they harbor a highly eccentric, deeply secretive, or even macabre private inner life.
The basement is where they actually live.
Exactly. The basement is the reality.
So underneath the suit and tie, there's this profound fascination with the dark arts or extreme philosophies or, these really intense nighttime pursuits. And no one at the office has any idea.
Not a clue. And this is perfectly represented by one of the ancient symbols found in your texts, the two-faced man.
Which sounds a bit malicious, no?
Well, it's not necessarily about being deceitful in the malicious sense, though. I mean, it certainly can go there. It's more about a soul looking simultaneously in two entirely different directions.
Because it's trying to process two different realities.
Right. One face is looking outward at societal norms, playing the game, fulfilling the earthly requirements. The other face is staring directly into the dark abyss of transformation. They're standing on the precipice of life and death, navigating the extremes of the human condition, all while making sure their front lawn is mowed.
That is fascinating, but man, it also sounds exhausting. And surely not every single person born under this placement acts out their dark side in the exact same way. Right?
No, definitely not.
I mean, human nature is far too complex for a one-size-fits-all shadow self. The sources mention that this energy fractures into 4 distinct psychological quarters, or padas.
Yes, the padas are where we see the granular differences.
Yeah.
If Purva Bhadrapada is the raw energy, the padas are the specific vessels that energy is poured into. They tell us exactly how that underlying dual-faced fire is going to express itself in the physical world.
Right. So if the core energy here is this intense fire dragon burning beneath the surface, how does the vessel change the fire? Let's start with the first pada, which falls into the Aries Navamsa.
So when you pour this ancient, secretive fire into an Aries vessel, it's directed by Mars. This makes the energy incredibly aggressive and highly mental.
Oh, interesting. So it's not physical aggression.
Not primarily, no. The dual-faced nature here is channeled into immense mental determination and willpower. They are basically fighting an internal war.
Like a philosophical battle.
Exactly. Imagine a lawyer or a philosopher who systematically dismantles their opponents, not for the money and not even for the glory, but to assert their philosophical dominance over their circumstances. The fire is in the mind and, well, it's weaponized.
Okay, so if Aries makes that fire highly mental and aggressively intellectual, what happens when you pour that exact same intense fire into a deeply physical, earthy vessel like Taurus? Does it become dangerous in a different way?
That is precisely what happens. The second pada falls into Taurus, which is ruled by Venus.
Venus, so it's about pleasure.
Suddenly, the energy becomes deeply indulgent. This is where the dark side of the nakshatra finds a distinctly physical expression. It's no longer a mental debate. It's a hedonistic, earthy manifestation of the shadow self.
So they act it out physically.
Yes, the fire is burning for sensory experience. You might see someone who is, a quiet accountant by day, but by night they're exploring the darker, more taboo aspects of physical pleasure. Or underground culinary extremes, or highly visceral avant-garde art. The shadow self needs to touch and taste the extreme.
Okay, so we have the mental conqueror and the physical hedonist. But does this energy ever just want to talk about it? Does it ever intellectualize the darkness without necessarily acting it out?
It does, and that brings us to the third pada, which sits in Gemini, governed by Mercury.
Ah, the communicator.
Right, this is the lightest and most curious of the four quarters. Mercury takes that intense, brooding energy of Purva Bhadrapada and funnels it into communication and analytical research.
So they're studying the darkness.
Exactly. They still have that profound fascination with the dark, the hidden, the macabre, but they approach it like a scholar. They want to talk about it, dissect it, put it into a spreadsheet, understand the mechanics of it. Think of the obsessive true crime researcher who knows every detail of a forensic report but would never actually hurt a fly.
Wait, so far these are all intense, but they're somewhat obvious if you know what to look for. Is there a version of this fire that just hides in plain sight? Because the sources single out the fourth pada, the Cancer quarter, and explicitly label it the diabolical pada.
They do, and for very good reason.
Diabolical is a strong word.
It is. The fourth pada is governed by the moon, making it deeply emotional, but also incredibly complex. The dual nature here is highly socially adept. They are absolute emotional chameleons.
Wow.
This makes this specific quarter capable of being either extremely dangerous or extremely benign, precisely because they understand human emotions so well. It literally represents both the persecutor and the persecuted.
Ah, yes, the diabolical Cancer quarter. Nothing says, I might bake you a lovely batch of cookies, or I might be meticulously plotting your demise quite like it. It's the astrological equivalent of a very friendly, highly empathetic assassin.
It's funny, but it's precisely that social adeptness that makes the fourth pada's true depths nearly impossible to spot. They can mirror your emotions perfectly.
So you think they're just like you?
Right. They understand the pulse of the collective, which means they know exactly how to blend in. The Aries pada might argue with you. The Taurus pada might ignore you to seek pleasure. But the Cancer pada will agree with you, validate your feelings, and smile, all while their internal fire is raging or meticulously plotting its next move behind their eyes.
That is wild. We've seen how these four quarters dictate the flavor of the fire, but to actually see how this fire behaves in the real world, we have to look at the operating system running it.
Yes, the planetary placements.
Right. That brings us to specific planets. Let's use another everyday comparison to make sense of the texts here. Think of the planets, the ascendant, the sun, the moon, as different operating systems.
Like that.
You're running iOS, Windows, or Linux, but they are all being installed on the exact same intense, highly strung hardware of Purva Bhadrapada. The machine itself runs hot. How does the system handle it?
That's the perfect framework. Let's look at the Lagna, or the ascendant, first. This is the operating system of the physical self and the outward personality. It's the mask.
Okay, so the face they show the world.
Exactly. When the ascendant is in Purva Bhadrapada, the texts note it manifests as a highly strung, nervous demeanor. They often carry an overtly serious, almost brooding look. They possess a deeply philosophical mind, but they are incredibly restless. You'll often see them experiencing frequent, sudden changes of residence.
Wait, why the constant moving, though? If they're trying to maintain a normal exterior, wouldn't they want a stable home?
You have to look at the mechanics of suppression. Holding a beach ball underwater takes constant, exhausting micro-adjustments.
Oh, that makes sense.
Their nervous system is just fried from pretending to be normal. The physical world simply cannot comfortably contain their internal pressure, so they project that internal restlessness onto their external environment. They think, if I just move to a new city or a new house, this internal pressure will go away.
But of course they pack their fire and bring it with them.
They do. They're constantly trying to outrun their own basement.
Okay, what about the sun? The sun is the core of the ego. But wait, I want to challenge this based on what we know about the sun.
Go ahead.
The sun wants to shine, right? It wants to be seen, it demands visibility. How does that work in a nakshatra that is inherently secretive and wants to hide its true nature?
You've hit on the exact reason why this placement is so psychologically volatile. When the sun, the planet of visibility, is placed in the nakshatra of secrecy, the ego fractures.
Ouch.
Yeah. The texts say it grants immense creative intelligence, but it creates a profoundly moody, fiercely independent ego. The tension between wanting to be seen and desperately needing to hide is just exhausting. That's why they absolutely despise routine. Routine feels like a trap to an ego that is already suffocating.
So how do they cope with that fracture?
The radical isolation.
Hmm.
The sources are very clear about their desperate need for absolute seclusion. They must retreat from the world regularly to process their internal fire.
They just shut everyone out.
Exactly. The ego is exhausted from trying to shine a light in a room that is desperately trying to stay dark. If they don't get that seclusion, they burn out. Or worse, they lash out and burn everyone around them.
Wow. They need to go down into that heavy metal basement we talked about, lock the door, and just be alone with the noise.
Precisely.
Now let's look at the moon, the mind, the emotional landscape. The texts say the moon here creates a scholarly and intuitive mind, but one that is prone to a cynical, brooding wit. But here's where it gets really interesting, and I have to push back on a massive contradiction I found in your source.
What stood out to you?
So I'm looking at the translations, and it says, these natives are famously miserly. They're notoriously stingy with their wealth. They hoard their resources cynically from the world.
Yes, that's accurate.
But then, right in the exact same paragraph, it notes this massive exception where they will literally give everything they own away. Why is it that this stingy, cynical person is suddenly willing to empty their bank account? What triggers that switch?
This raises a vital point about the underlying mechanism of their trust. You're right, generally, they look at the world with a high degree of pessimism and suspicion. They know humans have a dark side because they have a dark side.
Right. They see the basement in everyone else.
Exactly. So they hoard their material resources. They do not trust the collective. But, and this is the big thing, but if they respect you and if they love you, you are no longer part of the collective.
Oh, I see. You're on the inside.
You become part of their inner sanctum. And when that happens, that entire cynical exterior completely dissolves. They are liable to place all of their wealth entirely and without condition at the disposal of their partner.
It is an absolute all-or-nothing setting. There is no middle ground.
None. It highlights the extreme devotion this nakshatra is capable of. It's the dual face in action again. To the world, they are the miser. To their chosen partner, they are the absolute benefactor. If you manage to make it past their philosophical defenses and survive the heat of their fire, they will give you everything they have.
Okay, let's ground this even further into the earthly plane. Because if you're walking around with a brooding, highly strung mind that's deeply fascinated by the extremes of life and death, what on earth do you do for a living?
It's a great question.
How do you earn a paycheck with that kind of psychological makeup? And furthermore, what does carrying that kind of internal blowtorch do to your physical biology?
Let's tackle the vocations first. When you understand the psychology, their career choices make perfect sense. It won't surprise you to hear that they are naturally tied to themes of death, transition, and the macabre.
Right, that tracks.
They thrive in environments that would terrify, depress, or exhaust an ordinary person. They make excellent morticians, hospice workers, and cemetery keepers, naturally. But they're also drawn to medicine in a very specific, intense way. The texts explicitly list them as brilliant surgeons and psychiatrists.
Wait, I'm stopping you there.
Yeah.
I understand psychiatrists perfectly. They deal with the dark, hidden basement of the human mind. They navigate the shadows. But surgeons...
It feels contradictory, right?
Entirely contradictory. Why would someone with a chaotic, destructive fire dragon energy be trusted with a scalpel in a highly sterile, controlled operating room?
It sounds contradictory until you look at the core mechanism of surgery. The ruling deity of this nakshatra is Aja Ekapada, the one-footed fire dragon. It's a force of destruction. But what is surgery?
I mean, it's cutting.
It's controlled destruction.
Yeah.
You are slicing human tissue apart. The sources specifically note their profound connection to the concept of administering poisons as remedies.
Oh, wow.
Cutting the body to heal the body. Chemotherapy, radiation, extreme surgical interventions. This is all pure Purva Bhadrapada energy. They understand how to use a harsh, severe, destructive method to eradicate a disease and force a positive outcome.
Using poison as a cure, controlled destruction. That makes complete sense now. What other fields capture this energy?
They're naturally drawn to mystery, horror, and sci-fi writing, safely channeling their dark imaginations into art. But we also see them drawn to the absolute fringes of society. Because of their philosophical intensity and dualistic worldview, they can easily become radical activists or fundamentalists.
Always pushing the extremes.
Always. On a more literal level, they are highly prevalent in heavy, toxic, highly polluting industries. Metalworking, the leather industry, places where there is high heat, toxic waste, severe environmental pressure, and the literal alchemy of transforming dead material.
They actively seek out external work environments that mirror their extreme internal state. But that brings us to the physical body. Carrying around a literal fire has to have a severe medical consequence. You cannot run a machine that hot without burning some wires.
You really can't. The physical body bears the absolute brunt of this intense psychological splitting. In medical astrology, Purva Bhadrapada is associated with the sides of the body, the ribs, the left thigh, and the soles of the feet.
So if we look at the mechanics of this from an elemental perspective, they're straddling the end of an air sign, Aquarius, and shifting into a water sign, Pisces. But their core energetic nature is this severe ancient fire.
Right. Air, water, and fire.
Storing fire inside an airy, watery transition zone that is going to cause immense systemic pressure. It's like putting a fire inside a sealed steam engine.
That is an excellent observation of the mechanics. The internal friction is immense, and the medical texts confirm your theory exactly. Because they're storing this fiery tension and not always letting it out, they are highly prone to poor blood circulation.
It just gets stuck.
The energy physically gets blocked. They often suffer from swollen ankles and feet.
Yeah.
And very tellingly, they are deeply prone to an enlarged liver.
Wait, why the liver specifically?
Think about what the liver does. The liver is the body's primary filter. It's the organ that processes toxins, purifies the blood, and manages heat in the body.
Okay, so it's filtering out the junk.
Exactly. When a person is living a dual life, suppressing a massive, fiery, eccentric shadow self behind a polite 9-to-5 exterior, the systemic stress manifests physically. Anger and suppressed heat target the liver. The liver is literally working overtime to process the physiological stress of hiding that basement reality from the world.
The body keeps the score of the dual life.
Wow. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've mapped out the padas, the planets, the careers, and the physical toll. But we have to pull back from the details of the deep dive and ask the ultimate existential question.
Which is?
What is the earthly purpose of carrying this heavy, dark, eccentric energy? Why would a soul undergo this intense, painful psychological splitting?
If we connect all of these pieces to the absolute biggest picture, the true purpose of Purva Bhadrapada is not just about having a macabre fascination with the dark. It's not just about being a rebel or wearing a mask or hiding a secret life.
And what is it? The ancient symbol of this nakshatra is the front legs of the funeral cot. The front legs. It represents the beginning and the end. The earthly purpose of this heavy energy is the arduous, painful process of transforming the self through the fires of truth.
Transforming through fire, destroying the illusion.
Yes. The fire of this dragon is meant to burn away the superficial societal ego. It burns away the pleasantries, the small talk, the illusions, and the safe little suburban house we built to impress our neighbors.
It's a teardown.
It is a severe, almost torturous penance. But the underlying logic is beautiful. It's only through that intense, scorching heat that the native can forge a higher evolutionary state out of their own ashes. They serve as the bridge between the material world and universal consciousness. And bridges built over the abyss, well, they have to be forged in extreme heat.
They have to burn down the house to find the true foundation beneath it. As you sit here with us at Cafe Karma, letting the weight of this star settle over the table, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. We found something hidden in the footnotes of your sources that we haven't even touched on yet.
The architect phase.
Exactly. The texts hint that when a Purva Bhadrapada native finally integrates their two faces, when they stop hiding the basement and stop burning everything down, they stop being the destroyer, and they become the architect of a new era. So look at your own life. Look at the neat, manicured lawns you present to the world. If you stopped hiding your dark basement and instead placed your superficial routines into that fire of truth, what kind of castle could you build from the ashes? Think about it.